Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is my friend Devin Rios. Welcome, Devin.
Hi.
Just a background on Devin. Devin is 21. Devin is identifying as queer. We'll talk more about that. Devin went through the process of being excommunicated from our church in September of 2018. And we'll talk about that. Devin still has a great testimony of the church and actually looked at that church disciplinary council as a helpful thing for him. So some of you listeners may wonder, well, you're having an excommunicated member on the podcast. And I'm fine with that because Devin loves the church and he loves the Lord and he would like to come back to the church one day, but I think having Devin on the podcast can help us understand some of our members who are no longer members and are walking a difficult road, and also how we can best support them and understand them. As I sit across from the table, I don't really see Devin as an excommunicated member of the church. I just see him as one of God's sons who is worthy of his love and is worthy of my friendship. Now, if Devin's whole goal was to bring down the church or join ISIS and bomb my home, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But I don't sense that at all about Devin. I invited Devin to offer the prayer. You may know as an excommunicated member, you can't pray in church at the beginning or the end, but Devin obviously can pray. And this is not a church setting, and I felt it would be appropriate for Devin to pray, and he offered a wonderful prayer. So with that background, let's start, Devin. Talk about just coming to terms with your sexual orientation. When did you feel that you were not straight?
That's a great question. I've known I've always liked females throughout my whole life, and so in high school, when people would ask if you're gay, I would say no, because that wasn't the answer for me. Although I did find men attractive, but as a young man in high school, you definitely don't want to admit that at all. I kind of figured it out right after high school, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And talk about you take on the label of queer. Mm-hmm. Help our listeners understand more about that.
Yeah, when I came out to my parents, I came out originally as gay. I sat them down and said, listen, I am attracted to men, and that's about it. In the back of my mind, I always knew that wasn't the best answer, but it was the answer for then. And I think the journey that I entered after coming out helped me realize to where I was. And I thought, well, maybe I'm bisexual, or maybe I'm this, or maybe I'm that. But one day I was just reading about different branches, I guess would be the best word for the LGBT community. And I stumbled upon queer, and it's a blanket, or I'm sorry, it's kind of an umbrella answer. It kind of covers everything, and it allows me to be a little unclear. It allows me to say that, yes, I'll date men, I'll date women, I'll date transgender people, but I don't have to be so specifically labeled to this. And that's what I enjoy most about it.
Do you feel like your sexual orientation is fluid then, or do you feel like it's hardwired into you?
I would say it's definitely more fluid.
And do you find people that are LGBTQ give you space to be fluid, or do they want you to take on a label within that spectrum?
I haven't had anyone come to me yet and say you have to choose.
Good. And do you feel you're cisgender? Do you feel there's any non-cisgender, transgender within your umbrella of queer?
No, I identify as he, him.
Okay. Do you feel like you'll always be fluid, or do you feel like you'll eventually sort of land at a certain spot, Devin?
I think I'll always be fluid. I think I'll always have an attraction towards people. But I think if I were in a committed relationship, I would be with that person. I'd be with them.
Okay. Talk about your journey with the church. I know you grew up in a LDS family. We talked before we came on the podcast about your wonderful mom, Tracy, and the wonderful supportive mom she is, and your family. But eventually you kind of became less active in high school.
Yeah, in high school, I moved to my dad's house, and they are inactive members of the church, both he and my stepmom, and it's a little bit more of a party atmosphere there, more drinking and all that, and um, I wasn't going to church regularly like I was when I lived with my mom. I didn't go for quite some time, probably my whole middle school and high school career. Um, and
And that's the answer to the question. You're doing a good job, Devin. And then how did you reconnect with the church after time of being less active?
it really just came down to I was dating this girl right after high school or a few months after. And one day she just told me she didn't believe in God, and that was a hard pill for me to swallow. I dropped her off at her house, and I was just driving to, at the time I was in EMT school. I was driving to EMT school, and I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, I love God. And she didn't really know what sparked the question or sparked that conversation. And I kind of just told her, I said, my girlfriend at the time and I were driving down the road, and she said, I don't believe. And that really struck a chord with me, just because I wanted so much more for my potential future family than just living on this earth.
Did that cause you to have to assess your own relationship and belief with God?
It did. It caused me to actually start going back to church. And it was amazing. I started to feel the Spirit, and I started to kind of remember who I was.
How did that feel?
As anyone who is less active in the church for a period of time can tell you, when you start to go back, you feel better. You're happier in general. The Spirit's an amazing gift, and the closer you are to your Heavenly Father, the stronger it is.
Was the ward you came back to loving and accepting? Did you feel judged, or you just feel loved and supported?
I think it was kind of a blessing that I grew up in a split family home, because it kind of gave me out to why I wasn't at church all the time. I just lived with Dad. And so now that I lived with Mom, it was very welcoming. And I had known a lot of the members of the ward prior to, so it made it easy to come back.
And share with our listeners your feelings about the desire to serve a mission.
It was never something I thought about in high school. I never thought, oh, I'm going to, right when I turn 18, I'm going to go on a mission and I'm going to serve the Lord. That was never my plan. But shortly after going back to the church, I kind of just had a feeling to ask my mom and dad, how much does a mission cost? They're like, oh, well, it costs about this much. And they, as parents do, slipped in the joke of, but we'll help you pay for it if you want to go. And I was like, oh, no, my friend is going on a mission. I just was curious. Well, I was a little more than just curious. And a few months later, I decided it was time for me to go.
Wow. So you had not been active through high school. Was there one specific thing, Devin, that helped you decide to serve a mission, or was it sometimes people have a real strong single experience, or sometimes it's a gradual feeling?
The constant nagging of the Spirit. Ever since I asked my parents that day, how much does a mission cost? Every day I woke up and I thought, man, how great would it be to serve a mission? And it wasn't just when I woke up. It was when I woke up, when I was in the car, when I was driving, and just any time. It was this constant thought that never left. And so I heeded a prompting.
How long between when you got this prompting and started to ask this question of your mom, like how much your mission costs, until you actually got a call?
I asked my parents that about May, and I got my call December.
So pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. Tell our listeners where you were called.
I was called to Buenos Aires Norte, which is in Argentina. It was an amazing experience. I can actually admit that I had not even finished the Book of Mormon or 4 chapters of the Book of Mormon before my mission. And so that is a very daunting task, to go out and teach people about the restored gospel when you don't know.
Did you feel like you had enough of a testimony of the church to authentically go, even though you hadn't read the whole Book of Mormon?
I knew that my testimony of the church would change people, and through that, they would know that it was the true church. It is the true church.
I like your answer. I think even though you may have wished you had prepared more, and I think we both invite people to prepare more. I think, sometimes preparation's measured by how many times you've read the Book of Mormon and done some of these checklist things. Sometimes it's measured by internal preparation or spiritual preparation or a testimony or a feeling you can help people. Mm-hmm. Did you go to the Provo MTC or did you go to a different MTC?
I went to the Argentina MTC, which is the second smallest MTC in the world.
Wow. And did you know any of that language before you left?
I grew up with some Hispanic family, but I had, other than hola, it was about it. That's about it. I couldn't say a lick.
And share with our listeners a couple people that you taught. Just if, when you look back on your mission experience, and I assume you get a smile on your face when you think about certain people, members, less active, non-members. Give our listeners an idea of one or two people you taught.
I'll give you a family.
Okay.
Figuereros.
Say that again for us. Figueroa.
Uh-huh.
You could say it better than I
can. They were just this amazing family. I served in 2 areas my entire mission. One for 4.5 months and one for 3 days. And every day for 4.5 months, if we didn't hear from Sister Figueroa, we saw her. She was amazing. She is the family history person there in Argentina, and she helps everyone find their ancestors. She helped me find so many people in our family on the mission. I think we spent more than enough P days with her. She is and was a second mom to me the entire time third mom for me on my mission. Every day it was always, how's Elder Rios? How is he? How's your Spanish coming? I need you to stop talking in English with your companions. I need you to learn Spanish so you can understand me. She was very, very strong woman.
That's great.
But their family was just amazing. I spent my very last day of my mission with them all day.
Wow.
And they just showed me so much love and kindness, and they were the first people to know that I was coming home.
Wow. Share with our listeners why you came home.
I came home because I had a relationship with a man prior to my mission.
Okay. Thanks for having the courage just to share that.
Yeah,
I hope that's
sure.
Okay. And so this is something that you never talked to anybody about.
No.
Walk through the thinking in your mind why perhaps you didn't need to talk to anybody about this.
As I had mentioned before, I had grown up outside the church for most of my middle school, high school years. And my opinion was, I wasn't active in the church then, so it didn't matter. I thought, as most 17, 18-year-olds do, I know everything and I can take care of this myself.
And what finally caused you to say, I need to talk to a priesthood leader about what happened?
Funny enough, the death of my grandmother. I had gotten a call the day after Mother's Day that my dear Grandma Betty had passed. And I started reading True to the Faith, and I looked for spiritual angels. I just wanted any sort of information I could know to know that she would be okay, because she was not a member of the church. She just had a deep love for God. And I'm scrolling through True to the Faith, and I'm looking for any sort of answer, and I stumble upon sexual sin. And it just struck a chord with me that you need to talk to your stake president or your mission president. And so I called my mission president and I said, hey, President Smith, I think it's time we talk. And he said, okay, I can see you in 2 weeks. And I said, well, how about tomorrow? And so we met and I told him everything.
Did you know if you told him everything, you'd be going home? Or did you think maybe I'll stay?
It was a thought, but I left it in the Lord's hands.
How did it feel to talk to him?
He was the first person I ever told. And it was the biggest relief of my adolescent years.
Why was it a relief?
I've never been one to keep secrets. I've always been very open with who I am and what I do. And for me to harbor such a secret in my life, it hurt almost.
And, you're sitting across the table. I wish I could just give you a hug because you're talking about pretty tender stuff. And I think it's okay to talk about this because I think you're helping other people that may be navigating the same road.
Of course.
And need an example of somebody and how to navigate this. So you told your mission president, and how long from when you told your mission president to when you came home?
It was a couple transfers, because that was May and I got sent home September.
And it just kind of take that long to work through the logistical.
He forgot. We were at a ward conference and I pulled him aside and I was like, President Smith, I talked to you in May about this problem and I had never heard back from you. And he just said, Elder Rios, I completely forgot. And so in my mind, I'm thinking I could have coasted 2 whole years on this, but it's probably best that I reminded him.
And then what happened?
The next few days I received multiple phone calls a day from him asking me details on different parts of what I'd gone through. He asked me questions about how active I was growing up and just multiple different questions. And about this time it was transfers again, and I got put with the zone leaders. And I thought, oh man, that's never a good sign, getting put with the 2 zone leaders. And all of a sudden I got a new companion, Elder Rocho. And I thought, oh, I'm in the clear. I'm going to stay here the whole time. I was excited. And about 2 days into working the field with him in a new area, we received another call saying, hey, President Smith would like to meet with you. And with you and your companion. So I didn't think, oh, this is about me. I thought this is about us. I thought we're going to be moved or they're closing our area. So we said, okay, when would you like to meet? And they're like, be here at 12. Well, it was 10 o'clock already. We had to get going. He lived about 2 hours away. And so we hopped on the train and booked it down there. And he pulled my companion into the room first, talked to him for a minute. And as he walked out, he kind of made eye contact with me. I didn't talk to him before I went in. And President Smith sat me down and he said, so at this time you're being called home. And there were some tears. It's always hard to hear that you're going home from a mission. They're hard, but man, are they rewarding. And he asked me if I had any questions, and I said, yeah, can you get me a taxi? I have about 7 appointments I need to get to. And he just kind of looked at me like, are you kidding? Like, most kids in this situation would be bawling their eyes out, which I, of course, was. But I had bigger fish to fry.
And were you able to teach any of those people, or was that just not possible at this point?
We got back and we set a baptismal date with each and every one of those appointments. I received a call from him later that night, and he said, I have your mom on the phone. She's ready to talk to you if you want to talk to her for a minute. And I said, I'd love to, but I'm going to have to call you back in a little bit because we're finishing up dinner with the family. It was already past 9:30, so we shouldn't have been there anyway. But I called him about 45 minutes later. We were at home. And I just heard my mom's voice, a little bit of a crack in it. Hey, son. And every person on a mission loves to hear their mom's voice, no matter what the circumstance is.
That's a pretty powerful statement.
Mm-hmm.
Every missionary loves to hear their mom's voice, no matter what the circumstance.
And I stand by it. And her and I talked for a minute, and she asked me how I was doing. Told her I wasn't ready to come home at all. But she just reminded me that I've done what I needed to do. And not only have I finished my mission in Argentina, but I finished the mission the Lord had called me to do. And we said our goodbyes and said we'd see each other in 36 hours. The next day, I went back to my old area on divisions with the zone leaders, and I spent the entire day with the Figueroa family, them and their amazing children. And we had lunch and dinner, and we talked, and we laughed and laughed and laughed. And as I checked the clock as it dwindled down, knowing that I had to make one last stop, we said a closing prayer. And I thank the Lord for putting these people in my life. And I don't think I'd ever spoken as clearly in Spanish as I did in that prayer. To follow that prayer was a prayer given by Hermano Figueredo, who prayed that I would get home safe, and he thanked me for my time there. There were so many tears in the room, and you could just feel the amount of love that was there. And I looked over at my companion the zone leader, who was my companion at the time, and I could just see that he was confused about the amount of love that was in the room. But he was happy to see it. And as I went to stand up from my chair, Hermano Figueredo, or as I called him in the mission, Pa, sat me down and said, "Not without a blessing first." And he bestowed his hands upon me and gave me one of the most beautiful blessings I've ever heard in my life. He blessed me that I would have an amazing life and that I would find an amazing wife. And just that I would be able to keep the same smile I had on my face then through every part of my life. And it's a blessing I'll soon never forget.
Pretty tender experience. There's a lot of tears in your eyes. What were some of the helpful things your parents said as you came home? Because this is something no parent is prepared for, is to have a son come home. Sort of, I think they call this a belated confession, is the term as when I served that we would apply to you. It's sort of a belated confession. You're coming home. What did your parents say, your mom, that was helpful to you?
My mom didn't know what to do. She said, she called my brother who had served a mission in Mexico. She said, "Do I get balloons? Do I have people there? What do I do?" And
great question.
Yeah. And Kyle, my older brother, just said, "You and Corey, my stepdad, and my dad and my stepmom Allison," he's like, "you guys just be there for him. You guys love him. And let people know later." So it was funny. I got off the plane that Saturday morning, and you get the typical Utah airport experience. "Welcome home, Elder." "Way to go, Elder." "Your mom's down the street, Elder." And I was scared. I wasn't ready to see my mom and dad. So I went to the bathroom. I didn't have to go to the bathroom. And I just sat there for about 5 minutes, prepping myself, telling myself it'll be okay. And finally I decided it was time to go over to the escalator. And there my mom was, giddy as all get out, jumping up and down ready to see her son.
That's cool.
All my parents were excited. And first thing I hear is, "Wow, you're skinny." I'd lost about 40 pounds in the mission. So that was probably the best answer they could have given me. But they gave me loves, and we hopped in the car and I went to see my stake president.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like your parents did a great job.
An amazing job.
Just love you.
Yeah, they do. Never once did they ask me why I came home from a mission. In fact, they told me, "Devin, it's not our place. You did what you had to do, and that's all we ask."
What a great answer. What a great answer.
It's an answer I would encourage most parents to say.
I love that. And it's a little puzzling, your mission president forgetting. And I guess, we just all are human as leaders. And so I think that, I don't know what to make of that. I admire you bringing it up with him again.
One thing I would add to that is during my final interview, my exit interview with him, he did say, "I wanted to give you the best experience you could have." And so I pushed the envelope a little. So I think he might have just been kidding about forgetting. But he was an amazing mission president. In fact, during our closing interview, he said, "I'm going to share something with you that's a little out of the normal, but have you ever seen the movie Star Wars?" And I just kind of chuckled. I'm like, "Well, yeah." And you don't think that you're going to talk about Star Wars on your mission, or especially in your exit interview. And he said, "Remember when Yoda tells, I believe it's Obi-Wan, I'm not a huge Star Wars buff, to remember your training?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I need you to remember yours." And so he compared me to him that day.
And you like that?
I thought it was funny. And he just had a great sense about him, and he was always very nice to me, and which most mission presidents I feel are. And then we gave each other a hug, and I taught him how to take a selfie. I have that saved on my phone. That was the last thing he emailed it to me, and I received it once I got home.
What give us the time frame, Devin, of when you came home?
I came home in the mid-September
of
2017.
2017. One of the things that I've tried to learn a lot about is shame.
Mm-hmm.
And shame is this idea, there's shame, there's a difference between I am bad versus I did something bad. Mm-hmm. That's a huge difference. I am bad versus I did something bad. And the longer I served, the more I thought one of the things I could do as a priesthood leader was take shame out of people. Now, that doesn't mean we still teach don't sin, and we still invite people not to sin. But I felt so many people looked at themselves and says, I am bad. And I don't think God wants anybody to feel that way. And I love some of the things that happened here because it doesn't seem like, even though this could potentially be one of the most shaming experience to come home from a mission early, and you could have felt shame from your priesthood leaders, from your mission president, from your own family, from our church culture, and just a feeling that I'm really bad now, even though I've just given 6 months of my life to the Lord. And did you feel much of that, or did people try to just help you feel really good about yourself?
I never got the questions of, oh, wow, you're home early, or the comments or the snide remarks. I never received those. I did from little kids, but they don't understand. I received lots of love and encouragement and welcome home, and we're happy to see you. There was a couple jokes from close family members, 2 years already, but other than that, no, it was amazing. Just a loving experience.
That's great. And that's 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And then about a year later, because of, I just call this term messing up, you went through a disciplinary council.
I did.
And do you want to share our listeners a bit about that which led to your excommunication, which we talked about at the beginning of the podcast?
What made me decide to come out?
Yeah, just that you broke the law of chastity and you felt impressed to talk to a bishop.
Yeah. I'd gone on a date with a young man, and I had decided that it was time to tell my bishop that I'd done that. And so I walked into sacrament that morning, and I pulled our counselor aside, or one of his counselors aside, and I said, hey, I need the first meeting with bishop available. And he said, well, luckily enough, he's available all a second hour. And so went through sacrament, and I was getting ready to stand up, and I looked to my right, and the bishop was there. Hello, Bishop Geddes. And he said, let's go to my office and talk. And we walked in, and he said, Devin, how you doing? He and I have always had a very open relationship, and I can talk to him like a father figure. And I just said, well, Bishop, I'm here to tell you I'm gay, and I plan to live this life. I didn't receive any sort of shaming or, well, it's not in harmony with the church teachings. He just knew that I had made my decision. And he said, okay. The only thing I ask you is to stay safe. Remember that it's a dangerous world out there sometimes, and you can get caught up in a lot. And he kind of glanced around the room and went over to his filing cabinet, and he grabbed my mission plaque from inside the top drawer. And he said, I don't believe in coincidences, and I think you're supposed to receive this now. And here it is, almost 9 months later. And he just told me never to forget where I came from. And he sent me on my way.
Good interaction. And that led then to he reached out to the stake president,
yes.
Explained what was going on.
Mm-hmm. And the stake president called me in for an interview, and he was a little bit more stern than my bishop was. And he asked me the words, well, you're sinning, right? And I said, well, yeah, but don't most people know they're sinning when they're sinning, whether it's of this scale or not? He kind of didn't know how to answer the question, but we just kept on talking, and he said, well, just so you know, there will be a disciplinary court hearing, and we will hold it with or without you. We'd love to have you there, but we understand if you don't. And I said, don't worry, I'll be there. And that was right before Labor Day, and we got home from a vacation over Labor Day weekend, and I came home to a letter that just had date and time, location, and I made sure I was there.
So just so our listeners understand, this disciplinary council didn't happen because you told your bishop you were identifying as gay. It happened because you were living outside the law of chastity.
Exactly.
Okay. And did it surprise you that you were going to have a disciplinary council?
It was always in the back of my mind that may be the route this went. But I left it in the Lord's hands. In no way was I worried to what was going to happen. I just knew it was going to happen the way it needed to.
And as we talked before the podcast, this disciplinary council ended up being a good experience on many levels for you.
It was one of the most beautiful parts of the gospel, aside from the temple, that I've ever been able to participate in.
So you left the disciplinary council excommunicated, but you tell some of our listeners that would be kind of difficult to believe that you could both leave excommunicated and have a spiritual, uplifting, healing experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, throughout the entire time, you felt such a heavy sense of the gospel, and you knew that the Savior guided the conversation.
Did you feel unnecessary probing or curiosity, or did you feel like the questions were appropriate and came from a spirit of love and wanting to help you?
I think they did. I think they came from a place of a desire to understand. I think they wanted to know, why was I acting the way that I was? What led up to that?
Good. Because I know the disciplinary councils I've been involved with, sometimes the priesthood leader will just, in a factual way, with kind of the permission of the person, just explain, one paragraph statement why you're here, and maybe not a need to probe further on the details of the transgressions.
Yeah.
And more just try to ask questions that are helpful as they're trying to understand how to help you versus, whatever.
I was very matter of fact throughout the whole process. They asked me, when did this happen? Why did this happen? I just wanted to be my most true self. And one of my personality quirks that I'm known for is I am very lighthearted. And so one of the questions he asked me was, well, how did the mission help you in ways that weren't spiritual? And I said, well, they taught me how to connect with men, which is kind of funny considering the fact that I, date them. And a couple of the high priests in there smirked a little bit, that they realized they probably shouldn't be laughing at a joke.
I think humor is an appropriate thing. I think you knew and everybody else knew this is serious. But I think part of your personality is to bring I think that makes kind of diffuses maybe the tension
very much.
And tries to help, because everybody has the common goal to help you, Devin. So I think the process is, after a period of time, they ask questions and then you're excused. How long were you excused for?
So they told me I'd be excused for about 15 minutes, and that 15 minutes turned from 30 minutes to 45 minutes with someone peeking in the door to say, hey, just a couple more minutes, to about an hour.
An hour. And then you went back in, and tell our listeners what happened.
Yeah, I walked in and everyone in the room stood up. And I walked to the very back of a room, which a high priest room is not very long, but it feels very long when there's so much pressure in the air. And I took my seat, and the stake president said very clearly, I don't want to keep you waiting, but at this time you are now an excommunicated member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
How did you feel?
At that exact moment, peace. I knew that what had happened was by design. It was meant to be.
Did you feel love in that room?
I did.
Did the brethren talk to you as the meeting ended, or did you have a chance to shake hands or anything like that?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to shake hands with each and every one of the men. However, when I started to shake hands, I was pulled in and given hugs. And with each hug was given words of advice, words of encouragement, words of love, and words of support.
I like those high counselors or high priests that were around there, and there's even a little bit of homophobia that might be there where they're going to hug you. Someone who's just talked about being gay. And I love that they said, no, you're worthy of a hug. You're one of Heavenly Father's sons.
Exactly.
And so I love that they hugged you. There's something, I think, very healing and helpful in that. I've always felt church discipline, if it can be done, is the way to bring someone back to the church versus separating somebody more.
Exactly.
And it sounds like that was a helpful experience for you. And I think I admire you going. Did you ever consider not going?
That was never an option for me. I wanted to do everything to the fullest in the Lord's eyes.
What advice were you given? Did they give you advice on how to stay close with God or what to do next in your life?
They just reminded me that the only way to try and find true eternal happiness was through the Lord's plan. And I don't think that was something I forgot. I think I knew that through all of it. It's hard to know that the gospel is true, but to also know that you have a desire to be with a man. It's almost makes me feel bad to say, but in that exact moment, I put my temporal happiness above my celestial happiness. I decided to be happy on this earth rather than for eternity.
What are your hopes now? Do you hope to be rebaptized into the church?
I hope to be happy. And wherever that road takes me, I hope I can find it. And as I just told you earlier, I don't mind dating women. I don't mind dating different people. I love everybody. I love people for who they are, not what they are. And so do I think I can be a member of the church again? 100%. But I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm just doing it for a membership.
You're doing a good job. I'm going to come back to that. If you're not a member of the church, sometimes I see people, if they're not a member of the church or they leave the church or excommunicated, they kind of abandon everything. So some people that don't really want to drink or really do the club scene sort of are unleashed. I don't know what the right terms are. And they sort of aren't their real selves. They sort of take on behavior that actually isn't really who they are. How do you manage that? And did you go down any of those roads and kind of pull back?
Yeah. Shortly after coming out, I just turned 21 in July, shortly after coming out to my parents. And so you have the opportunity to drink. And I can quite honestly say I did. It's an avenue that I took fairly quickly after my excommunication. And I became very involved in the party scene. And it started as on the weekends, and then it started as Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning at brunch. And I just became immersed in it. And a little while back, I just realized that not only am I spending a lot of money, but I'm spending a lot of money not to feel good in the morning. And that's just not who I am.
Good for you. Are you out of that scene?
Not completely. I'll still go out every now and then, but it's not like it was.
How are you doing with alcohol?
I have a drink every now and then, but it's not a need. It's not a necessity in my life.
And how's your relationship with God?
One of the things I was blessed with in my life were parents and grandparents who weren't active in the church. One of those I talked about earlier was my grandma. She was a very strong Christian woman, and she taught us that a relationship with your Heavenly Father comes before a relationship with any sort of church. And so I was able to go away from the church knowing that my Father in heaven still loved me because I'm his child, not because I'm not a part of his religion. And he didn't not love me because I wasn't a part of his church.
There's some things that it's complicated. This is a complicated podcast. And we're talking about complicated things, but that's what we do on this podcast. And I don't claim to have the answers. I'm not here as a priesthood leader saying this is what we should or shouldn't do, but I think having these conversations can help us do better. I like I believe God loves all of his children, Devin.
Of course.
And that doesn't mean I don't believe in our commandments, but I believe he loves you. And I think the more I've met with people that are stepped out of the church or aren't following the church teachings, the more I realize God loves them.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing you can do can take you out of God's love.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be consequences of your choices. And I think, that period of time of more heavy parting, I think I love the prodigal son because he kind of comes unto himself and says, this isn't me. And I love that you don't get down on yourself and sort of think, well, I've gone to the point of no return. I've been excommunicated. I'm sort of doing the club scene. I'm really gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just start doing more bad stuff in this. And I love the way you just have the maturity and the relationship with God say, no, this isn't who I am. And I'm going to pull back. And I just think that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And I credit you and your parents for instilling something within you that helps you continue, even as you mess up, continue to move forward and try to stay close with God. I like that you keep your membership that you may come back in the church as an open door. I like that you haven't made ultimatums or final decisions. You're 21. I'm 57. You're a young guy. And you've had a lot of experiences. And I would hope that you'll look back and say, all this has been for my good. I love Elder Holland's talk about getting an impression to, him and his son were lost in this talk,
Mm-hmm.
and they went down a road, and then the son asked his dad, why did we go down this road? And I think part of this principle there is they knew then the road that they chose was the correct road, and they were more committed to it, and they knew they had to be on that road for a long time
Mm-hmm.
to get where they needed to go. So it's hard for me not to go back to be a YSA bishop right now. You're YSA age and sort of put on what I would say to you because I care about your eternal salvation, Devin, and I sense you're a really good man. So there's
Thank
this.
you.
If I were just being pure YSA bishop right now, I'd just say, Devin, God loves you.
Thank you.
And stay close with God. And do everything you can in your life to stay connected with God so that he can continue to guide you. And for some people, that's different things. For some people, it's scripture study, prayer, service for others, and everybody's kind of got their own formula for what they do. What's your formula?
Oh, it's a loaded question. One of my favorite things to feel close and to feel the Spirit is talks. I've never been an avid reader.
So church talks.
Church talks, yes. Or scriptures, listening to them. In the morning on my way to work, I used to commute about 30 minutes. And so in that time, I would listen to the scriptures. I would listen to a talk, whatever it was. But that was the way I felt closest to the Lord. That and attending church meetings.
Are there favorite talks you have? Or favorite leaders of our church that speak to your heart?
Remember Lot's wife. That's one of my favorite talks.
Why?
Just don't look back. What's behind you it's happened, and you know it's happened, but you don't need to, I don't know. I just love the idea of leaving it in the past. And I very much have a every day's a new start attitude. It's always going to be better than the last for sure. But I don't know. I love that one. And then there's another talk where Elder Holland talks about two brothers, cliff climbing. I don't know. Rock climbing. That's the
yes.
word. It just talks about having someone there for you. I can't remember the details, but I just know it's one of my favorites. But there's a lot of talks that I love, and there's one more by Bednar that talks about a mother looking to others in her time of need after her daughter had died, and her ability to put herself second to help people in the ward, and her ability just to be Christ-like. It's Christ-like.
I like that, and I like the way you have this personality that allows you to, I was going to say you're not a black and white personality. Maybe that's true or not, but I love, you're able to, even though you've been excommunicated from the church, still love the church and still trying truth and goodness there. And I love that. And I think it's an example. You seem to have great hope in your future, do people talk to you about, you've got to get rebaptized, or do you just feel like you're on your own road to figure out if that's going to happen for you?
You'll hear a lot of things when you're in the situation that I'm in. A lot of my non-member family has a hard time understanding that I still love the gospel. The questions I get the most are, how can you love the gospel when they don't love you? And that's such a hard thing to explain to someone who doesn't have the same foundation as we have, that it doesn't mean that God doesn't love me. And it's just such a hard, for someone who's not in the church, is so hard. And yes, you have the people who are like, oh, if you want to be saved, you have to be part of the church. And I've been told I'm going to hell, and I've been told multiple different things that aren't true. I may not be going to the celestial kingdom, but I'm definitely not going to hell. But you'll find good and bad in everyone, especially in times like these. True colors seem to shine through, and you want to keep the people who pull you in.
Do you go to church?
Not as frequent as I'd like, but New Year's come with new goals.
And you're moving, I think.
I am. You're right.
Is that increasing the likelihood you'd go to church in your new ward, or decreasing?
It's very much increasing. I'm actually moving to Orem. I've made some amazing new friends out there, many of whom are in the LGBT community and who are still very active and who still are the same as me. They love the Lord. And like me, they don't feel the need to choose. They know that the Lord will still love them and they can still be who they are.
Yeah, I do think we can do better if you find community of people in the church that are LGBTQ that want to be in the church, want to do their best to live the teachings of the church, and you can find community. So I'm excited for your future.
Thank you.
There's this, I keep flipping back, Devin, to, just, I guess there's a side of me that, wants to see you married to a woman in the temple because you're queer enough or fluid enough that seems to be a door that you're at least keeping open. So
100%.
Then it makes me want to get, and I try to do this less often, get prescriptive and say, well, Devin, this is how you should do that. And the more I served, the less I got prescriptive and tried to empower you to kind of figure out your own way to do that.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like if you had that goal, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, and I had that goal, then instead of me saying, well, this is the way you do it, and maybe that's okay for a priesthood leader, sometimes I'd say, well, Devin, help me understand. You have personal revelation. How? So I'll ask the question, if you feel like it could be a possibility for you to be married to a woman in the temple, what are your impressions you need to do to keep that possibility alive?
So
are you okay if I ask you that question?
No, of course, yes. I still would love to be married in the temple. That is a fact. I still have a picture of the temple.
Which temple?
It's the Draper Temple. It's where I took out my endowment.
So you have a picture of the Draper Temple.
I have a picture of the Draper Temple in my room, and I apologize. It's actually the Salt Lake Temple. It's okay. We all forget.
But you're endowed in the Draper Temple.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
I was endowed there. But it's a goal. I've seen the gospel bless so many families, and it'd be silly of me not to want that, in my opinion. I mean, not everyone has that same goal, so I can't say that for them. But in my eyes, for me, it's silly for me not to want that. I've seen it affect my parents. I've seen it affect many people in my family.
What are your impressions you have to do in your life to keep that door open?
Keep a relationship with God. I know that if I love him, it's always going to be an option for me to go there. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'm marrying someone for the benefit of being married celestially. If I find a woman that I absolutely love and adore, then of course her and I are going to go there.
Would it be helpful advice if I said don't date men because that's going to increase the likelihood you're going to marry a man, or decrease the likelihood you're going to marry a woman?
No. In fact, there was a brief moment after a few months of being out where I decided, oh, well, I know I like girls, so I'll just strictly date girls. And so for about a week, I had changed my Tinder to strictly women. And I just thought it was silly. But I was limiting myself, and I don't see a need for that. And of course, yes, I want to be, or a desire to be married in the temple, but I don't desire it that much, I guess.
And this is just honest podcast. I mean, it's just honest.
It's okay, yeah.
And so I guess I'm a podcast host here, not a bishop. I've got to remember my role here, Devin, so keep me in line.
No, you're okay.
But I guess there's a side of me that invite you to, if that's your goal, and maybe you have multiple goals, then I would invite you to make a list of the things that would help you achieve that goal, and the things that perhaps to avoid that would make it harder to achieve that goal. But if you were my YSA, I'd say, Devin, at the end of the day, this is your life to live, and you've got to choose your own path, like maybe your bishop did. And I'll walk with you in the sense I will continue to be in your life and continue to be somebody that's in your life, even if you choose a path that's outside of the teachings of our church that I love and invite everybody to live. I do think there's a principle in staying close to God that helps us make better decisions. So do you think, if you fell in love with a woman, how would she feel knowing that you've had relationships with men?
I think that woman's going to have to be very open to who I am. I am not a closed person at all. And most of the people I date will know that this is who I am and this is where I'm at in life. I don't look at past experiences with a negative attitude. We can learn something positive from each and everything that we go through. And I think if we actually love each other, that person's not going to judge what I've done.
Yeah, I like that answer. So some people that want to marry a woman, if they've had a relationship with a man, they'd say, well, that disqualifies me. And I'm no longer worthy of a woman, or whatever sort of thoughts would go in their brain. I love the way you don't go down that road. No. And you say, if I fell in love with a woman, I would be open with her. And that doesn't surprise me, because you seem very open. But I have seen so many marriages come together, a man and a woman going to the temple. Your generation's better at this than mine, of being open. And that sort of openness and vulnerability is actually a foundational point in the relationship, because she may need to be open and vulnerable. It may be a completely different category, but it may bring you together. So I would want to give you and all of our listeners that hope that your dreams that you originally hoped for, or you're currently hope for, don't go down the road because of something in the past to take those dreams off, and to think somehow you're not worthy of a spouse. I think you can be, and you can look at everything in your life as for your good. The atonement makes us clean, but it doesn't take away the learning from the experiences. Any thoughts on that, Devin?
No. I think that honesty is one of the best things. We've lived a very open life, I would say, me and my family. I think we've always been able to have open communication. But I'll be honest with you, when I came home from my mission, I didn't plan to ever come out. I planned to keep a secret life of this is something that no one ever needs to know.
Right.
And when I was talking to my mission president about what do I do when I find a woman that I'm going to marry, because at the time that was the plan. I'm going to go home, I'm going to marry a woman. And he said, you tell her. And I just looked at him like, what do you mean I tell her? How? No woman's going to want to know that I've done what I've done. And through the year and a half that I've had since I came home, I've kind of figured out what he meant. That you want to marry someone that's going to love you for who you are. And so by being more honest with myself, I've kind of figured it out.
Yeah, I really agree with that. We're kind of coming to the end of the podcast. Any other things you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
The main thing that I always like to point out is that the Lord loves us. We've all been through a lot. And I've seen a lot of strength, not only from the LGBT community within the church, but just members in general. Yes, we come to this earth with a certain harder problem sometimes. I mean, some of us are destined to only love one sex, and that happens to be the same sex we are. But as long as they know that the Lord's going to love them no matter what, because he will, you're his son or daughter, he's always there for you. And if you can find peace in nothing else, find peace in that he is always there for you, and he's only a prayer away.
Yeah, I love that. Devin, you're a mature man. You're 21 years old, but you've had a lot of experiences. You have a lot of maturity. You have a lot of perspective. You're still young.
Very young.
Still make mistakes, just like my own kids your age, but you do have a depth of maturity.
Another thing that I'm thinking of, I don't know why it came to my mind, but I felt impressed to share it, is there are going to be many young men who struggle with this, but who still want to serve a mission. And I say, if you're able to, you should. I highly encourage it. It's one of the best experiences you'll have. You're going to have some rough companions. Everyone does. I left mine in the street once. So
not because they're homophobic, though. Just because
it's a mission, and being with the same person 24/7 and no one else, it's hard sometimes. And yes, you're teaching lessons, but that's your best friend for 6 weeks. Just remember that. It's always 6 weeks. Sometimes.
Do you fall in love with any companions?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. On the mission, I looked at them as a brother. I didn't look at anyone that way. You know,
and for our listeners, that's really a consistent theme I pick from the men and women that are gay that serve missions is, I love the way you said that. I look at them as a brother, a sister, and you're kind of part of this great cause. You're set apart. And I've had a couple messages just this week of gay Latter-day Saints wondering if I should serve a mission. I love your advice. And that would be my advice also is, yeah, it can make this experience harder. And if you hear homophobic comments or negative things about people like you that are LGBTQ, it can add to your load. But boy, most that I've talked to have just felt sustained and felt they're part of a great cause and have felt a brotherhood or a sisterhood and helping people come into Christ. So I love that, Devin. Any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that too is when I told certain people for my mission who I was now, a lot of them were shocked. And I've received many answers to when I told people I was queer or gay. When I told people, because at the first I did just come out as gay, they're like, well, we knew. Or other people would say, well, hold on, you served a mission. And so if you think, if I go on a mission and I'm with men 24/7, they're automatically going to know I'm gay. They're not thinking that either.
Good point.
They're thinking about themselves. And a lot of the times, most of the young men out there are thinking about the girlfriend they left at home. Or just, they're not worried about your orientation on the mission. They're worried about what they're there for.
I agree. That's great, mature advice for our gay members who are thinking about serving a mission. I think of the prodigal. I've talked about the prodigal, and I don't know if you want to feel like you're a prodigal. I think we're all prodigals at times. In some ways, you're a prodigal right now because you're out of the church. But if you want to take on that label or not, I love, to me, it's the most powerful parable in the New Testament, because when that prodigal says, I want to come home, he thinks he's going to be a servant. He doesn't think he's worthy to be a son. He says, I'll just come home and I'll be a servant. And I think that parable forever answers the question. We've been in the faraway land. Do we come back as a son or a servant? And as you know, the father who represents God or Christ or our own earthly father is out in the field during the day and sees the sun on the horizon, and he runs towards him. He doesn't grovel, and he hugs him. And I think the son just looks at his father with amazement. I think the words, but Father, I've sinned against heaven and thee. I am no more worthy to be called thy son. So I think he's saying, why are you treating me this way? You should make me grovel. You should give me the cold shoulder for it. You should not welcome me. And I think for anybody that's listening that feels like they've messed up and they're no longer worthy of God's love, don't feel that way.
No, at all. We are always our own worst critics.
Right.
And that is just a fact. And I have learned that through so many trials and errors and missed opportunities, because I didn't want to be put out because of this. I missed out on many opportunities because I was worried that people were going to find out that I'm different.
Yeah.
And I look back on those and it makes me sad. I never went out for sports in high school because I didn't want people to think I was different. I thought people just know he throws like a girl. Or so there's just always, don't let who you are hold you back.
And so you have this maturity about being very comfortable with who you are, which I think helps you make better decisions.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that's a sign of the maturity, the spiritual, emotional maturity you have inside of you. Is you're very comfortable with who you are. Now, none of that means we don't want to keep the commandments. So just because you're comfortable with who you are, we know God's loving, some people might say, well, you're sort of giving a pass on commandment keeping. No.
Not at all.
God loves us, and so, but he wants us to follow his commandments, but he's pretty loving as we try to figure this out and make our way back.
I think it's important to look at it like a parent and a young child. As you grow up, you get slaps on the wrist. You have to learn through trial that you don't always do that thing. But like your parents, they still love you after you take a cookie, after you're told not to. He still loves you.
So thank you, Devin, for joining us. You're just a good man.
Thank you.
The thought came to my mind that if you are rebaptized one day, invite me. I would love to be there.
I would love to have you there.
And someday, let me know if you're getting married in the temple to a woman.
Of course.
And I realize you're not sure that's your path
at all, but it's not an option.
And I would invite you to, there's also this side of me that recognizes our church needs you, Devin.
Thank you.
The body of Christ needs, I love Corinthians 12. We need the arms, the hands, the eyes. And so the more I've served with LGBTQ people, the more I realize, Devin, we can't become the church we need to be if we don't have our LGBTQ members in the church. And I recognize it's not easy to stay. But I don't think we're the church that we need to be without our LGBTQ members. So if you're able to stay, and I sense you're staying, even though you're an excommunicated member, I don't really consider you have left because you believe in the church and come. But we need you to help us become the church God wants us to become, and teach us about inclusivity, love, kindness, all the things that Christ taught in the New Testament that you understand.
Thank you.
So thank you, our listeners, for joining us, and especially Devin for coming. Devin's mom's been here the whole time. We didn't put her on the podcast, but I think it's good for our listeners just to know that Devin's sweet mom is here, and there's been some tears shed between them. There's been hand-holding, and I can just sense this is a mother, Tracy, that loves her son, Devin, and has been with him through all of this. And I assume when Tracy was in Maya Maids or Laurel's, preparing to become a mother, thinking about raising kids, this isn't in any of those lessons. And you are doing a great job because you are just loving your kids and you are keeping the communication channels open. And, I can just tell how much Devin loves you and what a wonderful mother you are. And, my parents, I think their greatest credit is they just kept our family together. And nothing we could do could take us outside of the family love. And I think you're doing that. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, Devin, thank you for joining us. And
thank you.
Tracy, thank you for being here also.